Welcome to the UST Education recorded webinar series. This session is powered by US Transactions. UST is a boutique payment processing firm providing you with personalized service. We offer agnostic, best-fit technology solutions for associations, nonprofits, and enterprise clients.
So much material to cover, and there's a lot of material that I wasn't able to include that'll be in the handout. If you want to get the handout after the meeting, there's a lot more details. What are we going to do here? We're going to go through kind of the technology involved. Well, first I'm going to introduce myself, but also, how does this stuff work? Because I think it's really interesting, and I hope you do too, the components of a large language model and of generative pre-trained transformer models, what the current offerings are in the market right now. And the main thing, of course, is how might this be of use to your association or nonprofit? We're going to talk a lot. It's really a laundry list of potential options, kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall, all kinds of different concepts for you to consider to bring back to your association. And then no conversation on this subject would be complete if we didn't also talk about the risks and the scary stuff like AI is taking over the world and the apocalypse and all that stuff. And then I'll talk about how you might move forward with the technology and to give you a very concrete way of if this is of interest, what might you do next? So in order to prepare for this, I actually typed into Bing's ChatGPT, provide an agenda for a presentation on the uses of GPT for associations. And this will go through the presentation with this typewriter font. So you'll know this is the output that I got when I typed that prompt into GPT. And they did a really good job. They said we should give an intro. They said we should do background on associations and their challenges, which I'm not going to do. I didn't think that was quite so relevant. It's just another reason why you need to evaluate the outputs before they're used, because sometimes the systems are not on point. You can't just take it as is, but it did a pretty good job with this agenda. So as far as introductions now, there's more on this agenda here you can go through. I'm again Lisa Rao. I'm the co-founder of Fionta. We've been around for 22 years. I'm actually a computer scientist. I have a bachelor's, master's, and PhD in artificial intelligence in this area from a very long time ago. And I spent 10 years or so doing research in artificial intelligence, very much in line with the kinds of technology that's now available today. But at the time, it didn't work anything like what it does today. And I know many of you may know me because I do present a lot on technology for nonprofits and associations, which has been my life. But my claim to fame, this is going to be on my tombstone. Once I was in Popular Science in 1990. That's how old I am. And in this article on the technology I was working on, I said, in the future, we can imagine the computer as a librarian who not only knows where all the information is, but has read and understood everything in the library. What kind of a librarian would that be? Now, at the time, that was a dream, and it just shocks me that this has now come into its own. 30 years later, we see that this technology actually acts like it knows everything. And that's been very gratifying for me. My company, Fionta, works exclusively with associations and nonprofits. We primarily work with Salesforce, and there's about 75 of us. We're a great place to work, all that. You can go check us out on the website. That's me. Okay, so into the meat of the stuff, overview of technology. Well, ChatGPT said, give a brief overview of AI, and introduce GPT, so that's all good because that's what we're doing here, and how it's revolutionized natural language tasks. That was a pretty good agenda. So what is GPT? Again, it stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. And this rarely happens in science, in my experience. There was a paper that was published in 2017 that everyone in the field agrees was the seminal paper that caused this technology to work and to become mainstream. It was called Attention is All You Need. And I'm going to go through what the breakthroughs were in that paper, because it really did have very simple changes to the algorithms that were in place up till then. And those changes are what enabled or made possible the incredible explosion of this capability. It is a major scientific breakthrough. A little bit confusing, though, is that GPT is sometimes referred to in a specific instance, which is a technology that a company called OpenAI built. So sometimes when you say GPT, like ChatGPT, you're talking about a product by OpenAI, but it's also a generic description of the technology that's used to create these incredibly powerful systems. And it's amazing to me how fast this stuff is caught on. I shouldn't be surprised, but I was really surprised. I think we all were, how it went from 0 to 60 seemingly overnight. It was the fastest growing consumer app in history until Threads came on the market and people wanted to do that instead of Twitter. So what is a generative AI? They're basically very large artificial models that are trained on extremely large sets of text or corpuses that are used to generate, that's why it's generative, output, which is content. And these generative AI models can be used to create text. That's the most common thing. They're now generating speech. They generate songs. They generate diagrams or flowcharts. They can generate images or art. They can create videos. They can actually create computer code. They can even create new molecules, which is really scary, something they weren't designed to do. They can create new chemistry and discover science. They can create all kinds of digital artifacts. The largest model in 2019 had parameters, and now 330 million parameters. The current largest models have 1.76 trillion parameters. Now, parameters are basically weights on nodes inside this model. And if you want to just kind of have a mental model of what we're talking about, there are these neural networks, and there are nodes or parameters, which are weights of words or other indicators of the content, and you put in the input, and it goes through these hidden layers. There's often many, many hidden layers, and then it creates the output based on which have the highest weights. It's at a very high level. But back to what the scientific advances are that caused this to come on the scene. Underneath GPTs, there are these things called the large language models, which is like that diagram I just showed you. There are lots and lots and lots of nodes, trillions of nodes that are, you can think of them like words that have weights, and also information on where those words are in the output. Is it the first word in a sentence or the middle word? And the advances here were that before, the models just went in order. So you'd input a sentence and it would look at the first word, and then with the second word with respect to the first word, and the third word with respect to the second and first word, and so on. And those got really, they ran out of memory, basically, because the more words you had, the more complicated it would get, and there wouldn't be enough memory in the computer even to store all those weights. So what this advance did in the attention is all you need model was to actually focus attention, the reason it's attention, on a specific word, let's say net, and look at all the instances of the word net throughout the corpus, not just the ones that are nearby. Now, that may sound really obvious, but it hadn't been done before. And with that advance, it allowed these systems to operate in parallel so that every instance of the word net, wherever it occurs within the corpus, could be analyzed in terms of the weight of what the next most likely word would be at the same time. And that allowed the systems to be trained up on the corpuses in a reasonable amount of time, days and weeks instead of years or decades, which is what it would have taken before this advance was made. The other big advance is that it doesn't require domain-specific training data. So what does that mean? It means that in the past, we had to create examples like, what are my association membership benefits? We would actually see the answer that a system would generate and score it, yes or no, and then train the system on a scored set of data. And these systems now can train themselves, which is often called zero-shot learning. And the ability to train themselves allows it to become even more parallel, because the systems themselves can come up with examples like, what are our membership levels it will try to answer that question, and then it will look in the corpus or the database, find an answer, and automatically compare that answer to the question and score itself. So there's no human in the loop doing that. So these three advances of looking at the weights wherever they occur, not just in linear order, the parallel processing, and the ability to train itself, those three things were the advances that allowed this technology to work so well that it's scary. You may come across this picture. I love this picture. This is called the Shoggoth, and this was to try to describe how these systems work. And the point here is that no one really knows. It's a scary monster in there. The Shoggoth actually came from H.P. Lovecraft and is at the Mountains of Madness. And the one on the right, which is the reinforcement learning with human feedback, which is having the human train the system, all it's really done is put a smiley face on top of that. And they say that friendly mask obscures the mysterious beast, because underneath it, it's all these nodes. It's a lot of math and statistical analysis, and it really can't explain itself yet. It's something that we're all working on. It's no one really understands the inner workings of why it's doing what it's doing. And it's complicated, and it's changing all the time. So what you need to know is that only the largest tech firms and startups with huge investments really can create the underlying technology. Why? Because it takes tens of thousands of chips and servers in order to train up these models, and very expensive, high performance CPUs. Microsoft, you may know, has invested $1 billion in this technology. OpenAI invested $10 billion. The OpenAI's value now is $30 billion. I mean, these numbers are just insane and changing all the time. Just yesterday, ChatGPT announced that it's now able to search the web using Microsoft's Bing. Before, it was only able to generate answers based on the corpus that had been trained since 2021, which we'll get into. But again, another advance just this week was that ChatGPT has been connected with a speech generator so it can talk to you. And so this just happened yesterday, and really every day there are major advances of this stuff, and it is complicated and does change all the time. There's a lot of applications of the technology, many that are being deployed for specific purposes, as we'll get into. Some of it's open source. Right now, most of the language models you access via an application programmer interface. And you do need a technical expert if you have a large language model that you want to change. It does require a lot of technical expertise. Otherwise, you're just accessing it through the interface. You're asking it questions, and it's giving you answers. You're asking it to perform a task, and you don't have any ability to modify its internal workings. Some of them now are private, which is good for security and trust. That is, you can have your own large language model for your own company or association, and you can then add in your own data to make it more particular to you. Some of them are restricted, which is important for safeguards. But unfortunately, in the world now, there are many of these large language models that are unrestricted, meaning there are no guardrails. You can ask it, how do I build a bomb? And it's going to tell you, which is a really scary bad thing. So these are some of the dimensions of this technology: open source, how you access it, whether it's private, whether it's restricted, and so forth. But I wanted to go through kind of the stack. So at the bottom level is the CPUs. And these are very special processing servers. There's maybe 10,000 of them for GPT-4. On top of those chips, servers are the large language models themselves. And that's what is used to train up with the training data. And then from that large language model, they create what are called base models for specific purposes. And these are some examples of those base models, which we'll get into, and then the actual applications of these base models. So you can take GPT-4 and then create, for example, ChatGPT, which is a chat application. And then on the very top, you can take a ChatGPT and instantiate it for your own association by adding in your customer-specific data, say training it on the transcripts of chats that humans had in your association, asking questions, so that it will learn more about the specifics of your association. So all of these components are going into the technology. Very quickly here, again, very special purpose chips. This is where there's a lot of restrictions, so the stuff doesn't get out into the wild. We're starting to talk about making sure that bad actors don't buy 10,000 of these chips to build their own models to do nefarious things. Where is the corpus coming from? Well, just using OpenAI's GPT-4, it was trained up on the internet using what's called the Common Crawl, which is a very 8 years of internet from 2021. That is a lot of text. That's 410 billion words. It was trained on Reddit, which was 19 billion words. All the books, every free book on the internet that was over 20,000 words. This is the stuff that it took in. It took in all of Wikipedia, 3 billion tokens. These numbers are just insane. They're not, okay, well, I'm not capable of having my brain actually wrap itself around how much information these models have run through and created the weights for, so that they know that they can then use this information for all these specific purposes. Other components, the large language model framework, you can have tool-specific large language models that are ones that are written for specific tools like ChatGPT. You can get third-party ones. You can bring your own large language model to some of these things if you have the wherewithal to create one yourself. And then the base models, that are put on top of this large language model are often trained for specific purposes. So for example, OpenAI's DaVinci is better for logic problems. You have some that are better for classifying things. Ada is good for parsing text. And then there are specific APIs for these models. So for example, GPT 3.5 had a separate API if you were going to ask it to generate an image from an API that you wanted to generate some actual speech. So this is to substantiate the complexity of these things and to understand the different components, underlying the large language model. There are then the base models, and then there are the applications of those base models. So I'm going to go through just one, the most widely known one now that I keep talking about, the GPT that created ChatGPT by OpenAI. It's a general purpose model for language-related tasks, and there are a lot of tools. So what happens is technology startups and vendors will license this GPT-4 and take it and customize it for particular applications. For example, you can purchase Jasper if you're interested in automatically creating marketing content for your association. So that's an application or a tool using the GPT technology by OpenAI. Writesonic was specifically created for social media content. You can create chatbots. There's tools specifically aimed at creating customized chatbots. Even Microsoft Bing Chat is actually using underneath it ChatGPT and integrating it with Office. So again, another layer on top of these models, which makes it kind of confusing, I think, because you have to know I'm getting Jasper, and underneath that is GPT-4, and underneath that is the large language model, and underneath that is the servers. So there are a lot of these language models, so many. These are probably the biggest and farthest along. There's many more of them again, and they just keep coming. Like Meta just released its Llama large language model in July. So again, seemingly every month or two, you're going to see more and more of these language models. They all have their pros and cons. They all have their price points, their best usage scenarios, their what they've been tailored for, how they're restricted, and so on and so forth. Many ways to differentiate them. So sometimes this is, they're referred to as stochastic parrots. This term was coined by Emily Bender in 2021 as stochastic parrot, and it reminds me of this Far Side cartoon, which I loved before, for many years ago. where the animal mimicry is breaking down. The point of the cartoon is that it doesn't really understand the language. It's just mimicking what it's hearing. And that's the same feeling that caused Emily to say that these models are stochastic parrots, meaning they're stochastic and that there's a lot of statistics and math guiding them, but they don't actually understand anything. They're just mimicking and keying off what they're hearing in there. And they do make very scary mistakes, like one good apocryphal instance where it asked a chat bot, are the missiles coming over the pole or across the ocean? And it just says yes, which is a fine answer because it's an or, so it's one or the other. And it gets things wrong, like what is taller, Mount Everest or Burj Khalifa? And it says that the Burj Khalifa was taller. And even though it has the numbers there, it's not so good with numerical reason, because again, each one of these models has its sweet spot, and some of them don't do math as well as others. All right, so that was hopefully not more than you wanted to know about these models. I think they're fascinating, but the meat of this presentation really is how might you be able to use it? And I'm going to show you what the ChatGPT said. It broke down the uses of this type of technology for associations into 4 major areas: engagement, knowledge management, event planning and management, advocacy, and policy analysis. That's a pretty good list of different sections of technology that your association would be engaged in. Engaging members, most of you do that. You also have knowledge management and so forth. So within the member engagement, you're looking at personalizing communications, and that is an excellent application of this technology. You may have received emails recently that were scary because they seem to be, they've scraped your LinkedIn profile, they've looked at your social media post, and they've incorporated this information into an automated email just to you that says, hey, Lisa, I see that you're founder of Fionta and you have a background in AI. I'd like to talk to you about AI. And it was all generated by one of these chatbots. So personalization is something that these systems can do better than before and in an automated fashion using a lot of data. You can also use them for member support interactions. I'll show you an example of that, and creating dynamic content for event management, targeting your event promotion, segmenting your audience, optimizing the schedules is something that these systems can do. So you can take all the presentations for your event that you have accepted, and it will cluster them automatically into themes or sessions. So you'll have 4 topics on 4 presentations on one topic, 4 presentations on another. That can be very hard for a human to do. It can give you a first draft of that. It can also take, for example, your surveys on how you liked the event, and it will take the free text comments, and again, it will cluster them. Something that's very time consuming, and people use lots of different words, like I didn't like the food, or the tacos were cold, or whatever, and it can classify all the feedback on the food into one segment for you to then know the main feedback that people had on your thing. This is an example of a chatbot from an association bot, where it's going through and saying, I'm the chatbot for this meeting, how can I assist you? And you can ask it all kinds of questions. What's the parking like at the event? When is the session? When does the exhibitor move in? And so forth. So these chatbots are very accurate because they're drawing from the information that you've already documented in your FAQ and answering the questions. So as far as knowledge management goes, the chatbot suggested that ways to streamline knowledge management using AI is to summarize documents. And this is a really good application of technology. We've all seen the too long didn't read, but the TLDR, it can be automatically generated for any kind of a long document. You can ask the chatbot, what are the main points in this article? And it's going to give you the 3 main points so that you can spend less time reading and more time just getting the high-level summary. It can also go into databases and do actual analysis and analytics on data from databases, telling you that you have a lot of creating pie charts, for example, of what are the documents in your association's knowledge base, what are the topics that you cover. It's going to create that automatically, and do other kinds of analysis for trends like membership. You can ask it, how's our attendance at our meeting changed over the last decade? And it's going to find that data, put it into a graph for you, and tell you. And other ways of enhancing member engagement. For advocacy and policy, again, analyzing documents is a really great application. So it can actually read through or even find legislative documents on issues that your association is concerned about. It can generate drafts. So say you are interested in an association policy related to, say you're into energy efficiency, you can say, tell me the last 5 position papers on energy efficiency in appliances, and it's going to get those for you, and you're going to say, draft me a policy to increase the energy efficiency of those documents. It's going to give you one that you can then tweak. Also going out on the internet and finding what are people saying about energy efficiency in appliances, and it's going to monitor public sentiment and track media mentions. These are things that other systems used to do with a lot of effort and custom programming for each application that these GPT systems can actually do on their own. So sentiment analysis is great. You can say, I want you to go out there and find out what people are saying about our organization. And it'll summarize what it's hearing by going to newspapers and social media and so on and so forth. All right, so that's what the ChatGPT suggested were good applications of AI for associations. But there are a lot of them. This is going to overlap with what I said, but hopefully the repetition will just cement it in your minds. These digital assistants are really helpful in that they can draw from a much larger volume of data than you can. So most of you have probably not read every piece of information your organization has published in the last decade, but these systems can. And then because of that, if you train them up on the association subject matter, you can then ask it questions without you having to find where the information might be, to find inconsistencies in the data and so on and so forth. You can also help your members. This might be a service offering that you'll offer to members. So one of the things that that you might have to do, say you're a national organization that has state-based chapters, and you want to be able to summarize the regulations. So say the energy efficiency of appliances going on with that varies from state to state, and you want to gather together all of the regulations from each state. That might take you a very long time to do. You have to find where on the state website or the chapter's website that information lives, but these bots can go out and find all that information and summarize it for you, which is just a real time saver. And that's the bottom line with so much of this technology is it's going to do things for you that you could do yourself, but it would take you a long time, or do things that you couldn't do yourself, like you probably can't read the volume of data that might be relevant for a particular application. But these systems have read all that data, and they can do the analysis and the synthesis. Another kind of digital assistant, you can find like-minded colleagues. So say you work for the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, and you want to find a colleague who specializes in refrigerator efficiency, then the bot's going to go out. It's going to look at all of your members. It's going to find, again, their LinkedIn profiles, find what they post about on the internet, and suggest colleagues or members, other members that you could talk to. And again, time-consuming process that would be very helpful for you to find particular individuals with particular expertise automatically, because your member support staff, they may not know all your members. You may have a lot. Also, digital assistants to provide support for legal analysis. And this is capitalized because you do not want to have the systems actually doing a legal analysis for you, and there's even restrictions on that, as we'll get into. But they can help you to draft legal documents and summarize case law and find precedents and all that kind of stuff. Sales, so you've probably heard that the systems can automatically generate product descriptions. Another one of the bad things is they go and create products that don't exist, believe it or not, because these things are not perfect. They have a lot of scary behaviors that can occasionally occur, and you need to know what those are, and we'll get into them. Automatically generating product descriptions of existing products, though, is helpful. It can help you with a concierge or personal shopper. It can look to see what a particular member might be interested in and create personalized promotions automatically. Translation is another great leveling application of this technology so that you can provide your information in multiple languages without having to hire a translator for all these different languages. It can also translate your material to different education levels. So if you want to publish your website or make sure it's accessible to someone with a 6th grade education, it will actually take all your content and suggest changes to it to make it more accessible to people at different education levels. It can also non-jargonify, if that's a word, your content as well to make it more accessible to non-experts. And I've played around with this, and it's really quite a great editor. So this can help you to translate a lot of your material in these various ways. We already talked about the sentiment analysis, creating draft essays and opinion pieces. The thing that is really uniform to me about this is when you ask it, for example, to create an opinion piece on, for example, why, I don't want it to say anything political, why energy efficiency in appliances is an important issue, and what the expected energy savings might be if all manufacturers adopted these standards. It's going to create a really nice first draft for you to look at and tweak. And it's really helpful if you have trouble putting pen to paper initially. It can critique content, so you can ask it to provide feedback on something that you've written. You can ask it to actually do things like we mentioned, to find information, to summarize information. Another really good application, though, is just as someone to bounce ideas off of. So I typed in what are good ways to increase membership in your association and gave a few ideas, which I'll show. So you can treat it like someone that you would brainstorm against. It can play devil's advocate. You can ask these systems to assume that you're playing devil's advocate. What would you say about this argument that I've made? So that's a really fun use of this technology that can be very helpful. It's kind of like what I did when I typed in what would be a good agenda for this presentation, which I did after I'd already created the presentation. So it's just giving me other ideas. For example, its agenda suggested that I have case studies, present case studies of real life examples. I don't have time for that, but that was a good idea and not an idea that I had. Lots of bots, again, summarizing presentations and websites, doing a lot of analysis of spreadsheets. So the applications that are more tailored towards numbers and analytics, it can actually create graphs for you from data so that you don't have to be an Excel expert or a data visualization expert. That's a very powerful application for translating a lot of numerical data into information that you can absorb more quickly. And we talked about finding information. So here's where I took a ChatGPT from Bing and asked it how can I increase my association's membership? And it basically said networking events, website content and social media, providing different membership levels and options, providing a lot of helpful content resources, and soliciting feedback on this question from your members. So those are some pretty good ideas for how to increase your membership. And that's the kind of thing you can do to brainstorm. This is just a screenshot of Salesforce's AI, which is included in its Sales and Service Clouds now out of the box, where it's a chatbot and it's helping. You can assume, like, if you sell things, if your association sell things and people have questions about it, it's going to be able to answer questions and suggest other things to buy based on your specifics. So it's just a little in-place example. We've mentioned personalization. So, for example, these bots can take what your members are interested in and automatically suggest conference sessions that might be of interest. You can use those in an event promotion so that every member gets a different email with different sessions tailored to what they might be interested in, curated learning paths, automatically generating newsletter content, providing pathways for certification if you have lots and lots of different courses that lead to certification, editing photos and videos, creating other content, tailoring what they call next best action to ensure that what you do with your member is the best thing for that particular member. Like, you may suggest they go to the annual meeting, you may suggest they go to a particular webinar, you may suggest they volunteer for a task force. Based on their history of interactions with your association, it's going to see all people that look like this ended up doing this as the next step. So I'm going to suggest that next step to this particular member. It's also very helpful just to create transcriptions of audio from meetings, creating summaries of meetings and action items so that a person doesn't have to listen through all of those and figure out what the takeaways are there. This is just a screenshot of an implementation that we did, actually doing this kind of content creation for a learning pathway for courses. If you're interested in a major in social justice, here are the job description titles of people who have this type of background. Here are the career areas, the skills that you need, and it's automatically pulling together a huge course catalog, categorizing it, and summarizing it so that you can have personalized pathways for your learning. So just another example. You can use this technology in your conference processes for your call for papers. So say you got 1,000 suggestions for presentations for your meetings, it's going to automatically classify them, and you'll see, oh my goodness, half the speakers are suggesting that we talk about AI this year. You don't have to go through them all to know that. It's going to tell you the key topic areas automatically. We talked about the conference bots, the evaluation of the speakers, synthesizing all of that feedback. Instead of you're having to read it and trying to keep it all in your mind at once, the system's going to create these clusters for you that makes it much easier to manipulate. Generating taxonomies. So even on, you can run it on your website and say, generate a taxonomy of what my association or nonprofit works with. And it's going to tell you what the actual content on your website looks like in terms of the different topic areas in a hierarchy. That's a very interesting experiment that you can run. Automating processes. So there's a lot of applications relating to coding, software programming, and I'm not going to go into those because I do not have time, but there is a lot of things people are doing today to find errors in code, to fix code even. Once it finds the errors, it can fix it, and to even generate code. And that's why people are a little scared, because these systems can create their own programs, which makes them even more powerful. But you want to watch out if you use this technology in hiring, because that's where a lot of the bad stuff relating to discrimination can come into play, and we'll get into some of those bad things. So there's a lot of stuff here. There are so many tools here. There's just too many tools here. And I've just listed some of the ones that are currently available, and to give you a feeling for the separation in the space, how people have taken the technology and customized it for particular uses, like Otter AI is just for creating follow-up emails, action items, and meeting summaries. That's what it was made for. Ermine for creating the transcriptions, Descript specifically for videos and podcasts. You've got automatic speech recognition with Whisper. I'm not going to go through all of these, and there are so many more. But the point is that people have taken this technology, and really every day, every week, they're coming up with novel applications, creating new tools based on the underlying technology, so that they're working really well for the very specific purposes that they were intended. So I mentioned how they can critique your writing. Well, Notion AI was specifically made to capitalize on that capability to create an AI writing assistant tool that's built in so that it has a more of a workspace for you to do that whole task. whole nother slide on a whole nother set of sample tools. And I wish I could go through some of these, but again, you can have the slides and you'll see a lot of them. There's just, and this is scratching the surface, just scratching the surface. People have not even begun to conceptualize all the things that this technology can do. You're can expect to see many, many more examples of this. Like, for example, this is a really cool idea. If you're a programmer, you know that there's this concept of pair programming where you work together with a programmer and you both program together because two heads are better than one. Well, GitHub Copilot took an AI and turned it into a pair programmer so that you can use a bot to be your pair programmer in that. That's kind of cool. So someone had that idea and they built a system to do that. But there's, again, just scratching the surface. So here's your first question. Share 3 ideas given this gigungous laundry list of potential applications for this technology in associations and nonprofits. Share 3 ideas you have about ways your association could use GPT. This is your first engagement question. And while you're doing that, there's a lot of non-business scenarios, not surprisingly. I like the talking avatars. You know, if you're a gamer, they're creating these avatars now are chatbots. And so they're becoming much more human-like because they have all this power behind them. I like musicals, so Avenue Q, there's a song, The Internet Was Made for Porn. And unfortunately, or fortunately, a lot of applications relating to X-rated content, not surprisingly. They're very good at making jokes. They're getting better. You can use them to plan things in your personal life, like to plan a garden or a meal or a workout. And I'd give you a little example here of an automated workout guide that one of these bots did based on your physical therapy notes and your goals. It's going to suggest some exercises for you. Really good at generating first drafts of speeches or toasts or things that you may have trouble with. Just providing advice. So if you want to ask it a question, it's going to give you its best idea of advice. Those are just some examples. You know, they're so easy to try out. Really, it's your imagination's the limit. So how do you proceed with all this stuff? Well, first of all, you need a policy. And so I think you should do this now. I think every organization needs to have a policy around the use of this technology within your organization, because some of the technologies are not guaranteed not to share the information that you provide it with the rest of the world. There's been some notorious leaks and disclosures of proprietary information. And you cannot guarantee that anything you type into it or any information you feed into it won't get loose in the wild. So you want to have policies put in place. And I start with the Society for Human Resource Management, which has a draft article here, how to create the best ChatGPT policies. You want to monitor the usage. You want to encourage innovation and hope that it's only being used with appropriate data and protect proprietary information. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen, even with what OpenAI's ChatGPT has been trained on, a lot of the people who created that content are pushing back and saying, I didn't give you permission to use my information in this way. And you don't want to be liable for that kind of thing. Your policy is going to have these sections on what's prohibitive, what's acceptable, how to be compliant, whether you can use it for personal use, and so forth. So at the highest level, though, the first thing that I would do is you really want to cast a broad net. And I think I've done this scattershot on all these different ways that the technology could be used for your association. You want to surface all these opportunities. They can be internal, like making your finance team more efficient, or external in terms of your interaction with your constituents or members. And interview all your departments to brainstorm how these different applications might be useful. And then just like any other technology project that you might undertake or be considering in your organization, you want to go through and do a technology selection, because ChatGPT is not the answer to all these questions. There are, as I showed you, hundreds of different systems that you can use for specific purposes. So you want to look especially now at the track record. A lot of these systems are brand new. Some of them are just conceptual. Some of them are just in pilot phase. Some of them have guardrails built in, some of them do not. Some of them are made for very specific purposes, and some of them are generic. Some of them allow you the ability to load in your specific knowledge to tailor it to your association. So these are some of the factors that you're going to include when you select which technology or technologies you want to use to implement the opportunities that you will have surfaced and prioritized. And only then can you then do the cost-benefit analysis. It's with respect to a particular application of the technology and a specific vendor or technology. Once you've nailed those things down, then you can do the cost-benefit analysis to assess the business value, and then you go to execute. And of course, you have to make sure that you pilot it, test, train, deploy, and evaluate. This stuff is so new that you really do want to proceed cautiously and make sure that you're not spending a lot of money for something that isn't going to work well or is going to be blown away by some other system. And we can help. We would love to help you with this type of survey and prioritization and cost-benefit analysis. That's why we're here. But I need to get into the issues. There's a lot of issues. I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes, and then I'm going to end, and we'll take some questions. I'll have another question in here. There's a lot of risks in the use of this technology. You need to have a human in the loop, the guidelines in your policies so that they're documented and clear. You need to be able to proof and edit, fact check all of the content that comes out of these systems, because they make mistakes and they aren't transparent. They can interfere with member privacy if you don't have those guardrails in place. You can be exposed. You want to publish your terms of service so that people aren't clear that they're talking to a bot. These are what ChatGPT suggested for the ethical and privacy considerations. But there's a great article by the ASAE called 5 Key Legal Issues to Consider When It Comes to Generative AI. I recommend it. These are the 5 issues: your privacy, whether you're insured, whether you're protecting intellectual property, whether you're exposed in terms of lawsuits and such, and then a whole list of other risks and concerns, like, are you discriminating? Is the system making things up out of whole cloth, which it is able to do, called hallucination, and security and so forth. A lot of people also want to make sure that it's not just operating legally, but it's also operating ethically or humanely. And there's a lot of work that's been done on this already. So I just refer you to, you don't have to invent the wheel on how to use this technology ethically and humanely. You can look at these organizing documents from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, for example, their AI principles, Google's ethical charter, and so on and so forth. And these are the components of being ethical and human: accurate, safe, transparent, empowering, and sustainable. So many companies have said, you just can't use this, because they have not been able to feel comfortable ensuring that this technology is used appropriately. There's a lot of advantages now to being a fast follower, even though it's going to save you money and potentially produce better end results and content, allow you to do things you couldn't do before. You really don't want to spend a lot of effort for things that are going to be obsoleted in the near term. And there are a lot of mistakes to learn from that are still going to be made in the use of this technology. Always want to make sure that your cost savings are going to justify the investment. Because these systems aren't always accurate. They can be used for deception and disinformation. They could collect information that you didn't intend for them to collect. There are issues with IP and regulations relating to this. Our laws have not yet figured this out. What does for example, OpenAI owe the authors of the content that has been put into these large language models? We don't know yet. And so that's a little scary. How and when do you have to attribute something that you got from a ChatGPT to underlying components? And deepfakes are scary. The systems are not accountable in that if you ask it, you oftentimes, as they're constantly learning, you can't go back and have it generate the same output twice. You want to be able to remove data from the trained model, which not all systems allow you to do if you find there's an issue with some data that's been incorporated into it, protecting privacy and security. There's gaps in numerical reasoning, as we saw before. And there is a risk management framework that NIST has developed that I refer to again. You don't have to invent the wheel on a lot of this stuff. Many, many people have been working on these areas. And so if you want to know how exposed you are in the use of technology, you can refer to this risk management framework for risk. And just undertake the best practices in risk management, which means do an impact assessment. What is our risk in chatting with our members using a chatbot, for example? How risky are they? How likely are they to occur? And how likely is it that people will think that they're talking to a human? You want to be able to deactivate it if it goes off the rails. So have quick throw switches in there. There's a lot of disallowed uses. I am not going to go through these, and I apologize, but they're in the slides. There are already a lot of these safeguards. These are the things that GPT says you cannot do with this tool. And it's not a complete list because people are amazing at coming up with new ideas for how to use these systems in bad ways. But this is what GPT has published that you cannot do with these things. Now, it's not because of the technology. It's because they have said these are our guardrails and these are their usage policies that you shouldn't use it for medical, for legal, and so forth. And there are a lot of legal issues. For example, the actor body scans was a big part of this strike that just got resolved with the Screen Actors Guild. So list 3 risks in deploying GPT technology as my second engagement question. And I'm going to close with what the future is coming and take a few questions. The rate of change really has accelerated, as we've seen, and we still haven't seen anything yet. There's going to be a lot of regulation. There's going to be a lot of winners and losers in the space. There's a dearth of expertise in this area, unfortunately, because there's just too much need for it now. And don't worry about the jobs. Jobs are going to change. They're not really going away. So the last engagement question, what, if anything, do you plan to bring back to your association regarding this technology? So if you can answer those 2 engagement questions, I'm going to pause now. And since I only have 3 minutes, actually, I'm concerned I may have to follow up with the questions in the chat and turn it back over to UST for their closeout.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Can you once again read out loud those 2 questions just for attendees so they can
So what, if anything, do you plan to bring back or suggest to your association regarding GPT technology? And then the second one is list 3 risks in deploying this technology. And I know I went over that really fast, and I'm sorry, there's just so much stuff I want to talk about. And hopefully we'll have a workshop on that, a longer workshop to go into the stuff in more detail.
So this was packed with information, Lisa. Thank you. For everybody that's wondering, you can definitely reach out with your questions to Lisa and team, as well as the fact that they're going to be sending out their deck, and there will be a link on our UST Education website for the recording as well. It should be up there within the next 2 days. So with that, Lisa, I want to be sure to give you the final word. I am going to give you a final question, and it's in relation to what you've already just done with Lisa. Just put in there one thing you want to take back to your association. What's one thing that you would take back from today's webinar as something you could share with other team members? That will be your final CAE CPE question. Lisa, I want to give you the final word though. So go ahead and close us out.
Well, I really hope that you've gotten excited about this technology. I encourage you to experiment. I do think that the time is now to consider how it can be used within your association, to cast a wide net and to be very, very deliberative and always conscious of the risks. So that's really the takeaways here. And I'd love to engage with each and every one of you if you're of interest. I'm available, and look for our deck coming via email. after the presentations.